Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Automotive Historians Australia inaugural conference. It's wonderful to have a great group of people here for the first session of the opening. And the first thing that's going to happen this morning is we're going to officially open the conference. We've got our special guest, the Minister for Creative Industries, Martin Foley, MP, here to assist in those duties, along with our President, Harriet Edquist. So Martin has to leave fairly shortly because State Parliament is sitting today, and he has to be there before the bells start ringing fairly shortly. So Martin is the member for Albert Park in the Victorian Legislative Assembly, and I had the pleasant opportunity to serve in Parliament with Martin up till 2010. He's a great supporter of creative industries, which used to be called the arts, but very importantly was, I think, changed to creative industries in 2014 to emphasise the jobs, the economic element of the creative aspects of the arts here in Victoria. And it's a great pleasure to have him here, and he's been a supporter of Automotive Historians Australia since he launched the organisation last year. Martin Foley.
Thank you very much, Tony, and my apologies for not being able to come this evening, which was my actual real goal, but unfortunately I have to go to Sydney. But I was very keen to come and continue to support what is a fantastic organisation that is now not even a year old, I'm pretty sure, in terms of its launch, in so far as it neatly reflects, as Tony's indicated, so many of the kind of key themes that I personally and the government generally are keen to see around the notion of innovation, given that every pet shop galah in town is talking about innovation these days, but in reality. And the notion that the Automotive Historians Association and this conference gives me the opportunity to just very briefly take this opportunity to talk about some of my favourite themes which your organisation neatly reflects. Can I acknowledge Harriet Edquist, the President, members of the board, my good friend Tony, for all the work you all do in making sure that this important conference, this important organisation gets off on its right foot. I could also begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge that this is the land of the Kulin Nation. Last August, many of you were here for the launch of the Automotive Historians Australia at the invitation of Tony and the board as it then was kicking off, and at the same time we had seen the ridiculously successful Shifting Gear exhibition held at the National Gallery of Victoria. And that, of course, was a landmark exhibition tracing Australia's proud and indeed distinctively proud history of automotive design and engineering. And as much as a proud look back as it was also, I thought, a hugely optimistic look forward as to, despite the fact that we had dealing with the implications of the Abbott government's abandonment of the automotive manufacturing sector, we nonetheless had plenty of opportunities, and frankly still do, about how through the use of design and the use of organisations such as yours and the interest that can create, as to just how much opportunity there still is associated with an application of how design, particularly design principles, might be applied to the future of what our role in a global automotive industry is. And to reflect on where we've come from is an important part of that. Because of course the irony, and in some levels the injustice, was not just at the same time as Australia's automotive capabilities were being celebrated in the gallery for the first time, we were seeing the major manufacturers preparing to cease production. And sadly, I was part of a discussion earlier this week where Ford in Geelong was now starting that process of really winding down. But at the same time, recognising that Victoria and indeed Australia's economy is changing, and in that context of a relatively high skills and high cost environment, and with those economic forces and global sweeps of competition driving these changes, there are indeed plenty of more than niche but substantial opportunities for Australia to continue to adapt, lead and transform, particularly in the automotive industry. Moreover, it shows us that there is a role for government in making sure that we take the view that markets are not some autonomous, freewheeling beasts, but instead are largely constructs that we as communities and governments decide or do not decide to regulate in and out of existence, and that those human choices, those government choices and those communities' choices, clearly increasingly operating in a global context, are just as important to the future of these key sectors as they have ever been. And what shifting gear confirms to many people in the industry is that Australia was much, much more than the major overseas owned manufacturers in this country. And we knew and continue to know that Australia's design and engineering expertise has the potential to play a continuing, and I'd like to think increasing role in that continually shaking out global market. If it's something that can be willed and created by governments and community into closing down the auto manufacturing industry, it can equally be governments and regulatory practices willing of what can be the continuing operation, particularly around design. Our shift from manufacturing to a global contributor through that specialist design knowledge, through that application, is really important for vital jobs in so much of the manufacturing sector because of the crossovers in so many different platforms in industry sectors well beyond the manufacturing sector. That's why it's part of those same discussions with Ford. We were very pleased that both Ford and GM are committed to retaining auto design facilities in Victoria which will serve those global markets. And indeed, since last we launched this organisation, that has extended to GM, actually looking like they're pretty certain they will grow their design facility down at Fisherman's Bend. GM's current design centre, which employs 120 designers and 300 engineers, is one of only 9 global design centres for GM around the world, and it is only one of 2 such centres that are capable of fully producing functional concept cars from one end of the process to the other, its competitor in that field being Detroit. Another example that we're pleased to learn from our friends in Geelong goes to its continued legacy relationship with a range of suppliers to its sector. There's the much photographed and politician-friendly site, the Carbon Revolution, which has won a multi-million-dollar, multi-year contract to export those lightweight wheels for some of the fastest and most expensive of Ford's supercars. Carbon Revolution is but one of some 63 companies, big and small in between, that will continue to supply Ford after their Broadmeadows and Geelong factories sadly close in a few months. The Victorian Government recognises and supports the role that design broadly can play as that critical enabler in innovation, particularly in the automotive sector. Our creative state policy launched, as Tony said, with a specific emphasis on the levers that investment in innovation, in cultural sectors, in design can play in jobs, reflects what we identified through Boston Consulting is our $23 billion creative industry sector. And this is a major contributor to so much of what our new and growing employment areas will be. And can I thank RMIT, given that we're in one of their buildings, for the important partnership role that they are increasingly taking in this area. Whether it's from industrial to graphic design, product design, architecture design, we know that the notion and the application of design principles add values to businesses of all kinds. Our creative state policy specifically seeks to build on the role design has in our state. We want to include, and we are including, dedicated initiatives to boost economic growth through the better use of design to strengthen the capability and indeed the international profile of our designers. The design sector's importance should not be underestimated. It is increasingly providing us a deep and globally recognised tool of talented and skilled people. More than 85,000 people, through our own estimations, are employed directly in different design roles across our state. Victorian businesses spend some over $4 billion annually on the application of design principles. What's more, our consultancies earn an estimated $5 billion, increasingly globally, through servicing the growing client markets for design practice. This enables businesses to compete on differences and values and applications of ideas rather than simply on price alone. And that gives us a competitive advantage in comparative high-skill, high-cost economies. Our government continues to recognise, as fraught as it is sometimes in terms of trying to promote this argument, but increasingly with support of organisations like yours, the important role that design, creativity and innovation play in building the economy, promoting business productivity and industry competitiveness and innovation. Conferences like yours, applications of debates like those that you are forecasting, as well as the good time you're going to have for the car enthusiasts, is an important role in bringing together the players that drive design. Industry, academia, governments and the community. Discuss how design, particularly here in what we might call the industrial design area, drives us forward from growth in jobs and investment and in application. It really does provide us an opportunity to showcase our capabilities, provide momentum for people to work together, not just on preserving and understanding the past, but in doing so, to better prepare and to capitalise on the opportunities for the future. It's a simple proposition. It's one that doesn't happen by accident, and I commend the organisation for applying these principles in practice. I hope you have a very successful conference. I'm sorry I can't make the cocktail evening. I'd much rather be here than at a meeting of disability ministers in Sydney, but I wish the conference every success, and I look forward to hearing how it's gone. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Martin. Martin and Harriet are now going to perform a special ceremony, the photo opportunity, so thank you very much. Thank Martin now. Everybody, in case for those of you who don't know, my name's Tony Lupton. I'm Secretary of Automotive Historians Australia, and my pleasant task now is to introduce the President of AHA, Harriet Edquist. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. There's actually not a lot for me to do now. Martin's done a lot of what I was going to do, but I suppose my main job here is to welcome you all, and it's great to see all of you here and this event finally unfolding. I'm one of the conveners of, let's give it its name, Automotive History Driving Futures, the name of this conference. It's the inaugural conference of the Automotive Historians Australia. Sorry, I have read this, I shouldn't really be reading it. And on behalf of my co-conveners, and I'll just do a little bit of, we'll just put our hands up, Simon Lockery and Tony, who's introduced himself. Sorry, that was the wrong sentence. Simon Lockery and Mark Richardson, and you will know us all through the email because we have been emailing for months now, so this is putting faces to names. So on behalf of my co-conveners and also members of the committee who have been fantastic, and Tony Lupton, Norm Darwin, Helen Stitt, is Helen, I'd like to welcome you to RMIT and to this conference. And Daryl Meek, I'm sorry Daryl, I knew this was going to happen. There's Daryl, and Daryl has been an absolute stalwart. I'd like to welcome you to RMIT. And in particular, welcome to those of you who've made the trip from interstate. We've got some South Australian visitors, some from New South Wales, and also from overseas, of course, our keynote lecturer, Penny Sparke from London, but also we have Jeff Wardle from Pasadena, and our first speaker who will be coming in virtually soon from New York. So it's really good that our call for papers has reached the world, and the world's coming here, and we're really hoping for a great event. Putting together this conference has been a novel experience for a number of us, and I'd like to comment on what has actually been a very cooperative venture. It's been quite good fun. It's been fraught, but it's been good fun, and I've personally found a great pleasure working closely with the committee to bring this event to fruition, and particularly our regular meetings at the RACV bar, which I recommend to you, and they've been a particular highlight, and Daryl and Helen have been our hosts at the RACV. And in addition, just like to thank some of those people who have helped put together the RMIT staff from the Design Archives, Kay Ashton and Ricky Lee Robbie, who have helped us in the last days putting the whole thing together. Also, Hub staff, Eric North, who's helped with signage and so forth, and the AV and IT staff who are helping as we speak with all of our problems, which are now all solved. And finally, obviously, our sponsors, RMIT and Monash University. We would like to thank the RACV, who is our major sponsor and have been wonderfully generous, and also the National Motor Museum, who will be helping us publish the papers after the event. So thank you to all of those people who have helped us. And although the Minister has given us a little bit of background, I thought I'd just give you, to go over the background of where we've come from. So Automotive Historians Australia was founded in Melbourne last year, and our idea was to promote research education and the dissemination of knowledge about the history of the Australian automotive industry, and to involve members, industry and others in this history through things such as publications, events, meetings and conferences such as this one. We have a modest though growing membership which includes academics, but is also, and this is really interesting for a society such as this, it's not just academics, it's also industry representatives, enthusiasts, collectors, and a whole range of people who represent the very diverse and very rich automotive culture that we have here in Australia. Intentionally, the society caters to a very broad church, and we like it that way. And our patron is Ron Tauranac AO, who of course, as you all know, is one of Australia's most celebrated car designers, in particular racing cars. This is Automotive Histories Driving Futures is the first public activity organised by the Society. And its theme was suggested by the imminent closure, as we've heard from the Minister, of automotive manufacturing in Australia and the transition to new forms of private and public mobility that are underway all over the world, as we're hearing every day on the news. And so within this setting, papers were invited to consider the legacies and histories of the Australian automotive industry in its widest sense, possibilities for vehicles and mobilities of the future, and the future orientation is just as important as our look back to the past. And issues around heritage and conservation, and that's a very key theme, I think, that I think more will become more evident as we grow. The AHA is particularly mindful that the automotive history of Australia exists in great part not in the Academy. The Academy has done very little around embedding courses to do with Australian automotive history. Probably nothing, I suspect. But this history exists in the memories and in the collections of hundreds, possibly thousands of people across the country, in the blogs, in the books that they publish, and whose expert knowledge of aspects of motoring is fundamental to the history of automotive in the country. And we see one role that the Automotive Historians Society can have is to facilitate ways in which this rich tacit knowledge can be recorded and made accessible into the future. And this is a very important aspect of what I think we will be doing. And we're particularly delighted that our call for papers has brought together a broad range of speakers, as I said, academics, those involved in industry, collectors and enthusiasts. And we're very pleased, of course, to welcome Professor Penny Sparke, who will deliver the Ron Tauranac Lecture, keynote lecture tomorrow morning. And as I said, a publication will be produced after the event. I suspect it will be the first in the world. I am a bit boastful, I have to say, but I suspect, even though there are automotive historian societies, I mean, the American one's been going since the 60s, and the British chapters since the 80s, I think, and there are others. This could be the first peer-reviewed automotive historical conference ever.